Hello, hello. I'm so excited today. I'm here with a very good friend of mine, Bevin Reynolds. Bevin is a world champion indoor freediver. And what a lot of people don't know about Bevin is she took 3 medals at the AIDA World Champions in 2023. However, one of the aspects that might not be as well known is she only started freediving a year and a half before. So I'm super excited today. We're going to be chatting about all things to do with motivation and discipline, performance, and actually some of the harder aspects, which sometimes people don't often talk about. So Bevin, great to see you. And it would be lovely if you can just share a little bit more about your story, like how you came to freediving and what the background was to that.
First of all, hi, Kim. Thank you so much for having me here. Super excited for this conversation. The story began, I think, with a surf apnea course, actually, with John McCarthy. And it's quite famous in the freediving community of South Africa, taking a lot of South Africans and international people to Sodwana Bay for some interaction with animals, marine life. But he holds the surf apnea course where you get an introduction to freediving. And it was on that course that Ant Latimer essentially spotted me. I pushed off the wall and he was like, "Oh wow, I think she's got some talent." And he actually said to somebody, she could break a South African record. And he essentially was so enthusiastic about what he had seen that I got really curious and really interested. And I'm like, okay, what is this freediving thing? I didn't really know anything about it. And then I started listening to the Freedive Cafe podcasts, and I was waiting anxiously for the first course that I could do, because in order to train, you need to do a level 1 course at least. And that was, I think, 2 months away. So in those 2 months, I listened to almost every single Freedive Cafe podcast possible and had a whole lot of incredible feelings and thoughts and experiences. And I started to fantasize about this sport, and I kind of started to fall in love with it before I'd even really given it that much actual physical experience of doing. And yeah, I did my course in January, and I think the next week I started training quite like regularly. I mean, I literally slipped into a training program of the USA record holder Evan Walter. Slipped into his training program, and I think 3.5 months later, I broke my first national record. And then the next day, my second. And yeah, that was kind of the beginning. I don't know if you want me to go at all.
No, that's
Yeah, the
amazing.
next part of it. Yeah.
So I'm so curious, like, what do you, I mean, to break a national record within a couple of months of finding a new sport is pretty incredible. What do you attribute that to? Like, because I know obviously with diving, there's, the physical component, but very much also like a mental aspect around being able to have those kind of distances and times and bits and pieces. So be super curious to hear about that.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll speak firstly into the physical component. I do think that my history as a swimmer from when I was a teenager, I swam competitively for about 9 years. I think that laid some kind of foundation. I've always been a water baby, and my parents used to struggle to keep me out of the water. So I think it is William Trubridge. He talks about no, it's actually an Italian diver. Actually, he talks about aquaticity, which is your feel for the water, and it's how water like born you are.
I
I've
love
always I've always had a really a real comfort in the water, really a lot of comfort under the water. um yeah, and then I think what I quickly realized was that there is something in my physicality that, I don't know, the way that my body utilizes oxygen is some kind of like inherent talent or genetic component, I think. And then obviously when it comes to the mental side of it, I have quite a high tolerance for discomfort and the capacity to yeah, kind of be to train really hard Yeah, and then there's obviously the discipline of showing up at the pool, like come rain or shine, which I think was also fortified as a teenager. Yeah, so
I would
that's
love
some of it, I think.
I'd love to chat more with you about this ability to be with discomfort. I mean, certainly in my very amateur, like fun adventure free diving, that has been something that I found so fascinating, right? Is being able to relax into the discomfort, how much further you go. And personally, I feel like that's such an incredible life skill. And I'm just wondering, sort of, where has that come from in your life? Like, was that again like something you cultivated or learn, or you just naturally have?
Um, yeah, without having too much of a dark humor, I think there's a layer of it that is definitely like a trauma response to childhood, like create order, form. No, I mean, when I was very young, I used to actually set up little training routes around my neighborhood, around my garden. I would create routines, I would create training plans for myself. So there's something in me that like almost always just felt something good about having a plan and following through on it, and pushing myself a little bit in terms of an edge, and feeling the power or of my body, or the just the capacity of it to do something. I kind of got a lot, yeah, a kind of reward of accomplishing or achieving something that I had set out for myself, even as a young person. Like
Yeah.
I'm talking like 6 or 7 years
Yes.
old.
So I love that because I mean, and if you feel comfortable to share more, for me, I've had this sort of almost fascination around, excellence and actually the interlink between potentially challenges and trauma that have happened, and what the interplay is there, often with exception, like doing exceptional things or different things or out the box things in life, and whether that's been derived in some way from challenges that have been experienced in the past.
Definitely, definitely. I mean, look, I'm speaking quite. I think it's probably much more complex than what I'm going to share now. But my
Yeah.
interpretation of it is that there was something about making order out of chaos. So if an environment felt chaotic or felt unsafe, or there was uncertainty and I wasn't able to hold it, I created some kind of order and certainty through discipline and through following through on plans that I created or were given to me. And there's always been this level of like a desire for external approval definitely came through, like in my younger self. Like, I mean, the father wound, right? Okay, wanting dad's approval. I mean, that came through quite heavily in the gymnastics that I did, in the athletics that I did when I was younger. Yeah, and then I think later in life it transforms somewhat, but it lays some kind of foundation, definitely. Yeah.
And I was actually going to ask, and I was wondering, like, as you've got older with that, I imagine to achieve what you have achieved, there has to be this no longer necessarily looking externally for your results and your validation. I imagine there must be somewhere internally within you that's just like an inner knowing, and I'm curious if that's true for you, how like that's been cultivated, and yes.
Definitely. I mean, I think the inner knowing is an excellent it it's a bit ethereal in terms of its inner, the first experience of it, like it's hard to touch onto, but then by bringing it into consciousness and almost working with it and reinforcing it, I felt like I was able to turn up the dial on it, so to speak. And I was
Yes.
like, okay, so I've got this baseline confidence, but there's still loopholes here, there's still areas where I feel a lot of doubt, and then how do I work with those kind of weaknesses to strengthen this inner knowing, so that the belief that I have within is I want to say unshakable, but it never really is unshakable, but as
I understand that
as much as possible.
when you're tapped into it, it feels unshakable kind of thing, even though there are
Mm,
fluctuations within it because we're all
yeah.
human. And I'm really interested, how did you start to like plug those holes of self? I mean, is it something that you are able to articulate?
Um, I think at some level I was paying, well, yeah, I was quite consciously going, okay, when in a training session or leading up to big dives, not as much in a competition, because I think the competition was more the manifestation of the work. I
Yes.
used every training session not only to train my body, but also to train my mind. And so I would, after each session, I would be like, okay, what did I feel anxious about? Where did I feel resistance? Where were the doubtful thoughts coming up? And what was that underlying fear or concern or in essence, like self-doubt that was contributing to that anxiety? So I'd be like, okay, I feel so resistant about this particular training set. What am I afraid of? And then like kind of going deeper within myself to see if I can, create a different set of belief systems. And I created a whole list of affirmations that I was actually saying to myself every single morning. I
Yeah.
had my little habit tracker, and I was like, affirmations tick, affirmations tick. I still got the habit tracker. I think I did it for like, I don't know, 177 days or something leading up to World Champs.
Yeah. Well, and
Yeah.
the other thing that I love about diving is, I mean, I just feel there's so many reflections of life, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
we bump up against these limiting beliefs, but with diving, you can actually test its theory, if that makes sense, as you have just kind of said. So you
Mm-hmm.
can like change the belief, and then you almost get feedback straight away to be like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, like I can go further, right?
Mm-hmm.
Me, the interesting thing has been like, well, if that's applicable in the pool or in the ocean, then surely that's also applicable in life, right?
Definitely, definitely. 100%. And I think also, we yeah, I think the feedback loop is important, and because we do need those experiences that solidify what we are saying to ourselves. We can't just have a mantra that we repeat and hope that that's going to land into the subconscious and actually become embodied. We need to have lived experiences where what we've said in the mantra kind of comes true or
Yes,
actually happens, and then
yes,
that like
yes.
helps to really transform at a deeper layer.
Yes, and it's interesting you say that because I did some training with the Flow Research Collective, and they do the neuroscience around peak performance and stuff like that. And that it was one of the things they say is like you have to have feedback. But the interesting thing is, like, if you don't have feedback, you have to create it, right? So
Mm-hmm.
ask for feedback or set up things where you can start having those measurements and data to be like, yes, see, that worked or that didn't work.
Yeah.
Um, so again, also, I don't think I mentioned, but you're also, I mean, in your full-time role, a trauma therapist. You work with trauma, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the specializations.
Yeah.
Also, a lot around relationships and gender and sexuality, and a bit of self-esteem and motivation kind of comes in on the edges.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm really curious, has there been anything around your work and diving that has supported you, like within
Mm.
vice versa, I guess?
Mm. Definitely. It is a vast question because there's the theoretical knowledge and then also my own like recovery from trauma
Yeah.
that kind of comes together. Like the recovery from trauma transforms you at a deeper level, and then you've got the theory of psychology that you can apply in
Yes.
other ways. So it's hard to know like which probably had more influence. I mean, I don't think that's something we could really discern, but definitely, yeah, those two components contributed to, yeah, my accomplishment.
Yes, I'm just really curious when you say sort of your recovery from trauma and the benefits that you get, and not to be crass, because like anyone who's ever been through trauma, it's like a really difficult thing. So I don't want to try and make light of like,
Mm,
oh, the sunny side kind of thing, and with that, like the sort of also that they're like, by taking that journey and doing the work, I'm curious, like, where have you found growth? Where have you found expansion? Where have you, like, what are the areas, if you want to share with us?
mm. Yeah, I think the two main things that come to mind, and there's probably more, but I'll keep it streamlined for now. The one is something to do with nervous system. I think growing up in the environment that I did, I actually had a very sensitive nervous system, and then through the recovery, it became a lot more resilient, and I was a lot, yeah, just I'm able to tolerate a lot more. In terms of like feedback internally and externally from the world. And so that definitely contributes to diving capacity.
Yes. And life,
Uh,
right, as well, I guess. Yes.
definitely, definitely. I mean, I do feel like I'm going to say I've grown a thicker skin than ever before. And the more I dive, the thicker the skin got.
Yes.
And it's the thing then is trying to stay open and like remain like keeping the heart open, and not becoming too like guarded in any way. But I think the other component is the emotional regulation, like learning so much more about how to manage my emotions, first of all, how to even recognize them and feel them and allow them to be there, and then naming them and then working with them or sitting in them, which I think that emotional regulation plays a huge role, especially like in competitions. It's like people will say to me, "Oh, you don't look nervous at all," and I'm like, "Wow, you have inside feels like I'm on fire." But I'm able to sit in that discomfort of that performance anxiety and still be able to perform, which I definitely think came from sitting in many therapy sessions, being with and grieving the past and working with the trauma recovery. So yeah, that's
And as
my
you
take on
speak,
that.
yeah, as you speak, what comes up for me is also, being able to hold this whole range as humans that we have of the overwhelm and stuff, and also then to sort of keep returning back to center, that like inner, like
Mm,
even with it all kind of, we may do that imperfectly, but
mm,
that's what I hear in you, that there's still that place,
mm-hmm.
despite kind of what may be going on outside. Is that correct?
Yes, and I say that center didn't exist before I started doing the work.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so finding that center, that strength, that inner knowing, that power, whatever it is, is that something that you're saying you attribute to your sort of recovery around your trauma work and stuff?
Yeah, yeah,
Pretty cool.
definitely.
Beautiful.
Yeah, definitely. Uh, yeah, I'll just say yes. Keep it short and sweet.
And
Mm,
just finally, like to start to round up. So I mean, we've kind of touched on discipline, and I mean, I've trained with you. Your work ethic is unreal, and most people know you for that. But I also know you as a dear friend, and the capacity of your heart and your wisdom and your intuition, and I'm curious how that also has played a role in your diving and your success in your life.
mm, Thank you for that question. I almost want to say the first phase of my diving was very much like I want to say like a masculine approach to accomplishment, where it was much more utilizing intellect, and it was a lot about power and strength and discipline. But with time maturing into the sport and developing a little bit more of a holistic approach, I think I'm much better able now to utilize my intuition and a more feminine approach to my training. So I'm not quite as as I used to be, but it feels a lot more integrated and a lot more sustainable, actually. Um, so I do think within me I can move between these two
Energy.
aspects. Yes, yes, yeah.
Yes.
And yeah, so I think the first phase of my diving was accessing that, my masculine, and growing into that. Now I feel like I'm like growing into my feminine strengths in my approach, and I feel like I'm in a much better place for a balance, a much more balanced way going forward. But you know, even as I speak, these are the kinds of concepts that I'm only able to use as a framework to understand my inner, because of the work that I've done and the reading that I've done and my interest in psychology and spirituality, I suppose, as well. So
Beautiful. I love that.
yeah.
And I'm curious also, by being able to sort of tap more into that like feminine aspect, you know, what do you gain from that? Like for me, there's more sort of a sense of being in the body and being surrendered and not like fighting or end goal perspective. And I'm curious for you, like how that has maybe shown up in your diving and like what it maybe feels like, or yeah.
I think in a way I'm just a lot more nurturing towards myself, and there's more compassion, and I want to say like leeway. Yeah, I can take a step back and say, okay, I showed up today and it maybe wasn't as like as I used to be, but I've still done something, and there's something in that just feels so much more holistic and like kind, and in the long run, as I said before, a lot more sustainable actually.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
I'm going to be able to pay attention to my body. If my body says no, okay, then I don't have to force.
Yes.
Yeah, so
Love
it's an
that.
interesting dance.
Yes. So from my side, that's it. I want to check in with you if there's anything that I've missed that I should have asked you that you'd like to kind of add.
I think there's something that it's a question. I think a lot of our motivation can be at the individual level, and then we can have a certain drive and an energy that pulls us forward or pushes us forward towards something. But I think the biggest shift that happened for me, actually, like energetically, was the moment that I took my inner motivation and I made it less personal. I went, what about the collective? What about others? Like, how does my medal or my record have any influence on the people around me? So I actually transformed one of my like key mantras to wanting to be a source of inspiration for others. And the moment I did that, I tapped into like a whole other layer, because I was like, me showing up and walking the path that I do inspires others, and it takes me out of my ego and my own little like, oh, I want to get, you know, this amazing accomplishment, and it makes it about the group and about others, and that felt really beautiful. And then I actually got that feedback from people, and they said, you're so inspiring. You know, you inspired me. And then I'm like, okay, that feels so warm. And
Yeah.
that's, yeah, that transforms the whole journey for me. It gives it so much more depth and meaning.
I love that. And I relate so much, but it's interesting as well, like even from the neuroscience perspective, with that, like by being kind of service, by looking, you know, not necessarily for your own gains, but how you can contribute. So fascinating. You're actually starting to then introduce, you know, oxytocin and more serotonin. And so like, it's so fascinating actually that, you know, we end up gaining like really through that ability to kind of put our attentions in through service and supporting others. You know, I love that. So it's really beautiful. I think that's like such a wonderful note to finish on. Thank you. It's been so great to share this space with you, my dear friend. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right.
Thank
Take
you.